Well, I see a lot of folks here are interested in magic. And this interest has been rather general for a long time. You may probably remember that in about 87 or 6, there came out a new version of the Holy Bible to be read in churches. And in that new edition, this new one just out, it states very firmly that 3 astrologers saw his star and came to venerate him. Now, this is going to be a blow to somebody, but not much, I don't think. It's really more important to save the civilization than it is to quibble. Now, the astrologers were Magi, and the Magi of Persia were the source of practically all of the esoteric tradition that drifted into Europe. They were very wise in many things, and their wisdom went back a long way. And among their various achievements were not only astrology and divination, but also a series of very practical discoveries and explanations that will be of service to us today. 3 forms of magic were recognized: white magic, a sort of gray-colored magic, and black magic. The Magi of Persia were essentially white magicians. They used their arts and their wisdom and their skills for the service of humanity. But like most ancient nations, they had their problems. In the old days, the contact of the human being with his environment was very hazardous. There was no philosophical background to depend on, no regulated theology to lean upon. Each individual had to face the problems of life with whatever courage or insight he possessed. And early in the development of early civilizations, there came around the idea of a medicine priest, a priestly clan, which is perhaps best known for its part in the development of the American Indian structure in North America. It was recognized that there were holy people born with a peculiar gift of some kind, and these holy ones became priests. Now, they were not priests as we would know them now. They were not ordained to a ministry or something. They were priests because they could talk with the olds, or with the spirits, or they could see things that others couldn't see, or they could find out where the buffalo were. Such a one was Sitting Bull, who was a medicine priest for his entire lifetime, practically. And all that time he lived as one small tribe, and he predicted for them, and he worked with their sick, and he prepared them for their journey into the afterlife. He even went with them, according to legends, and helped them to make the crossing to that world beyond, where the campfires are in the sky, stars. The priests of that type were an absolutely essential part of civilization. They made it possible. The average person was frightened. He had no securities, no protections, and no insights. He had to depend upon something, and that something was early the medicine priest. Now, the medicine priest in turn had to depend upon something. He had to depend either upon the insights which he possessed within his own nature, or make use of symbols and figures and signs and various talismans to enforce his beliefs or teachings. Not very long ago, we noticed in one of our prominent journals a whole page devoted to the classification of available charms that you can buy right now. These charms will do almost everything. They will help you to face the future, or they will take care of housemaid's need. Whatever you may have, you can get a charm for it. An exposition was made in London, a survey was taken, and 40% of the London school children carried charms with them every day. Now, because we still have the uncertainties, and in these critical times, the uncertainties become more immediate. probably we were never as troubled as we are today, even in primitive times. In those days we didn't know enough to be troubled as we are now. But we are finding more and more that we are not able to handle the situation. We cannot cope with the skullduggery that is going on in society. And the average person, like the average primitive human being, must seek some solace, some consolation, and some source of inner strength. Out of that came the most interesting of all art, perhaps, fetish art. Art to convey to the individual a certain strength due to its own designs. The Egyptians were masters of fetish art. So were the Gnostics. Most of the Oriental people are strongly developed in it. It is to carry something, have something, say something, know words or formulas by means of which you can meet unexpected emergencies. Now, the attainment of this type of security is, of course, open to considerable psychological speculation. It's very possible that the fact that we believe in the charm gives it an efficacy, that we believe in it and we gain a strength from our believing. We support a weakness in our own nature and are able to face things a little better or a little more securely than we could without this symbolical help. Now, objects around the people of old days were used for making such charms. The turquoise charms of the American and Central American Indians also drifted into Tibet and were used for all types of medical, spiritual, ethical problems. We also noticed another peculiarity. Nothing in its native state is magical. It has to have something done to it so that it becomes something different. And I saw a very good example of that on Navajo Reservation. Two little stones, about the size of a nickel each, were very pretty little stones. The children played with them. But then came the time when something was necessary. A new charm had to be fashioned. So the two little stones were laid one on top of the other, and a loop of rawhide was put around to hold them together. Immediately they were not two little stones anymore. Now they had the power of the olds, the powers of the truths, the powers of the goods. By carrying that little charm around, you gain some kind of spiritual strength or consolation. You were able to face the day with greater bravery. And if it happened that you were going into battle, you felt you had a greater chance of survival. Charms of this kind and fetishes were very, very common in Europe. In the days of the great Crusades, there were a great many pilgrims that went to the Far East and Near East in search of religious consolation. All the way along the line there were dangers. And many of these pilgrims wore symbolic forms or figures in their hats to protect them. First they began by using gold or silver medals attached to the hat, but many of them were held up and killed for the gold medals, so they became finally merely paper symbols. But if you had that on your hat, you had a better chance of getting to Jerusalem. And you probably had no actually better chance, but you approached life with a greater positive sense of strength. So the charm and the fetish were strength symbols. They helped us to go on and do things we did not believe to be possible. In medicine, it's the placebo. It is a little capsule of nothing but ground white flour. If you take it, it'll cure all kinds of diseases that you do not have. You think you have them? So this helps you. Everywhere there is a magical value in the unknown. There is something that, if you can visualize it as useful or helpful, can do wonderful things. This is the secret of holy relics. No one knows how efficacious they really are, but that they have resulted in miraculous circumstances cannot be denied. We do not know just how the healings of Lourdes and Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré are achieved, but certainly the belief is important. The charm, their symbolism, the prayer, and a physical action to make all these things into one pattern gives the individual a strength that he does not otherwise possess. Now, white magic in its essential form must be virtuous. White magic is that which serves without hurting. It is that which accomplishes good and is never used for any other purpose. White magic is the use of the powers of life, the powers of nature, and even the ordinary faculties of the mind for the perpetuation of constructive imagery. It is necessary, therefore, that all white magic, in order to retain its nature, must be backed by a strong moral character. This is something that has been very common throughout Asia, where most of the dedicated mendicants, the holy men, have achieved a kind of white magic by gaining complete control over their own minds, their own emotions, or their own actions. These people, to remain white magicians, would under no conditions pervert, corrupt, or compromise the principles which they hold sacred. Therefore, a life dedicated to certain spiritual principles gains also a strength. And this strength can be considered as magical, because it involves faculties that cannot be completely classified. No one can be sure what happens, but if something does happen, then in some mysterious way an energy that resides in nature is made available to the human being. And it is generally known and widely respected that where dedication results in a greater interior enlightenment, the individual does perform heroic services for mankind.